Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to Modern Magicks, a Code Coven conference. My name is Kinsey. I'm an associate producer with Code Coven, and I'm here today with Emma Kidwell, who made I'd Love to, But, which is in our game showcase. Emma was part of our Intro to Game Making courses. And Emma, if you'd like to introduce yourself at all.
Yeah, hi, my name is Emma Kidwell. I am a writer and narrative designer in the space, and I took Code Coven's course last summer, I believe it was. And I'm in the class, I made a game, a little choice-based game, since that's what I like to do, called I'd Love to, But, which is about navigating the weird social space currently of, socializing during a pandemic. So, yeah.
For sure. And so actually, yeah, I'd love to talk a bit more about that game, partly obviously because we're highlighting it, but also because I personally am a big fan of it. Because you're right, it is extremely topical right now, and it's really changed kind of how we communicate with our friends. So I was wondering, how have people in your life or people online kind of responded to the game after playing it?
I think because it came out when things were still pretty uncertain about, oh, it'll be fine and gone. Like pretty soon we can just kind of live normal. We can still go out and do things. It's fine. You just gotta like mask up and, everything will be back to normal in no time. And clearly that is not the case, and it never has been the case. I think when I uploaded it to my personal itch page, most of it was pretty just positive, like, or thought it was funny because, it's hard to broach conversations like that with friends or family because it is hard. So I tried to keep it pretty lighthearted in tone, even though it's a pretty serious subject matter. But as far as I'm aware, none of my friends have played it, which is completely fine. But as long as people on the internet seemed to not hate it, that's all I can ask for. Or if they like even stop to consider for a second, what am I doing? Then that's also, exactly what I want.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of to inspire a bit of introspection or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. Um, and this is, I know, kind of a theme with a lot of the games you've made, this idea of tackling very personal ideas or difficult topics. I know you've made Twine games about an aging grandmother and cultural identity and even buying condoms, all sorts of a wide array of experiences that may not be reflected in games very often. So I guess in a general sense, could you tell us a bit about making these kind of games and what your approach is?
Yeah, so aside from making a game about condoms, since that was a college project and it was before I really refined my voice or what I wanted to explore in games, I tend to take moments from my personal life that inspire me in that moment. It's like a little snapshot of my life, and then I make up about 90% of it so that it's not a one-to-one recreation
Sure.
of my entire life and the things in it. And I just kind of go from there. So it's very much a product. All of my games have been a product of what am I feeling at this point, and then trying to justify making such a personal game by telling myself, okay, well, I can make a game about this, but I have to learn a new skill or incorporate something different. So I don't think that's how people should make games. Just make whatever you want, make what you want to play. But that's kind of been the process for a long time for me now.
Yeah, that's so interesting, kind of coupling it with this personal moment and also a goal for your craft. That's a really great approach, in my personal opinion, at least.
Thank you.
Of course. Um, and I'm curious, if you had to, what would you kind of name the genre of this style of game? I've heard, personal vignette kind of thrown around before, but how would you say
I
it resonates?
Yeah, I definitely prefer personal vignette because a vignette to me is just a little sliver of your life, just, and it's also just a short story. So that
Mhm.
pretty much lines up with how I view it, and almost to a sense an autobiographical game because it is, I'm writing about something that happened in my life and I am the person telling it. But it's not 100% true because I would like to retain some sort of privacy in my own personal life, but I would much prefer the former. I feel like it sounds more professional, and it sounds more accessible, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's definitely maybe a barrier some people feel when it comes to making games about themselves is that mix of, what's the perfect strike of privacy and vulnerability, um, and making it feel that other people like can play this game, even it might be about me and not necessarily feel blocked out by that. And I'm sure that must be kind of a nerve-wracking experience, here and then sharing those kind of games with people. Maybe not, but I'd love to hear kind of how you decide or what your process is of, how do I take this experience that interests me and what is that distancing like, or what is that kind of creating that privacy look like?
Sure, that's a really good question. In the beginning, especially the two games that I made about, well, I guess especially in the beginning, the game, I think it's called Not If You Can Hear Me. I made that, and I basically used creating that game as a form of expressing myself, but also avoiding looking at things in my life that I needed to confront. So in the beginning, it was just, I don't care. I'm just going to put I'm going to write this in an entire weekend and I'm going to throw it into the void and never look at it again. And of course, it ends up being one of my most favorite things I've ever written, but it was also not a healthy way to make a game. And even though a lot of the conversations that I wrote were fake and they are all just idealized versions of how I saw the situation or how I saw this relationship, I've taken that and kind of morphed it so that I am still being authentic and true to myself, but being a little bit more careful in how I take care of myself. And because, writing a personal game can take a lot of mental energy out of yourself. So I'm very, very careful now to make sure that I have processed whatever I want to make a game about and give it some distance and time before I decide, let's just make a game out of it. Let's just do it. That's not healthy, and it's taken a few games to get there, but I definitely try and think of Emma as more of a character in these games. Much like I was inspired a lot by Nina Freeman's games, so I kind of wanted to do the same, where her version of Nina is not Nina herself, just like a character in any other video game. If that answers your question.
No, it absolutely does, and I think that it's a great point to bring up about this level of making sure you as a creator are ready to make it, because I think sometimes in any creative field there's kind of this idea of like you have to suffer from real art, and real art has to really be raw and an act of catharsis, which isn't necessarily sustainable, like you said. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really important kind of perspective to bring to the table.
Yeah, it's definitely taken a long time and like therapy and all of that stuff to realize that, you don't have to be in a constant state, a bad state, in order to feel like you're making good stuff, because that's not true at all.
Yeah, full stop. I completely agree. Kind of pivoting a bit, but staying on this idea of, what are you bringing to your games? Alongside making games, you've also, got a career as a games journalist, writing for Polygon and Vice, and more platforms, publishing pieces there. So, I'm curious, if at all, how does that side of your writing inform or maybe influence how you approach writing for games?
When I did freelance a lot, which I don't tend to do now, I guess I don't think it really informed my writing in the way that I do it now, just because I consider it two very different things. If I did freelance, it was more through a critical lens as a game player and not so much as a game maker. And when I sit down and make things, I do kind of in the back of my head think of, if I were a critic, like when I finish my game, like if I were a critic, how would I view this? So I kind of have two brains working at the same time. But for the most part, because to me, it is different for like types of writing, I don't tend to bring it home, I guess, with me at the end of the day. And I don't think I ever have. I made a point to have very different voices for each thing. Because journalistic writing at the end of the day is going to be very different than your creative writing, as it should be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting though to think that, you know, you've got this part of your brain that you can turn on or off about a critic lens.
It's been very useful and helpful, I will say, as a game maker myself. So I definitely appreciate and value the time that I had as a games journalist. It has done nothing but help me, I think.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, you know, again, when you embrace this idea that when you make games, you're always kind of putting a part of yourself in there. You know, every experience, everything that's led you up to this point kind of influences your work. So yeah, I guess as we're wrapping up, I'd love to know if you have any sort of upcoming projects or things you could talk about that are in the works.
Yeah, the only thing that I can talk about is, again, my own personal stuff. I finished writing a game last year called I Wish I Were a Robot, which is going to be, well, it is a game about depression. So, in the same vein of making sure you take care of yourself before you write something very personal, I waited a year to write this and I made sure that I was 100% okay. Well, no one's ever truly 100% okay, but I made sure that there was enough distance, time, space from how I felt when I wanted to make this game and how I feel currently. And so the Emma in that game is nowhere near the Emma now, or the vision of the character that I've created, that is Emma, has experienced very different things than what I did in real life. But again, I want to keep that air of like mystery and privacy to myself. So again, 90% fake, most of it real. So it's going to be the most personal thing I've ever written, which is why I'm waiting a little bit to put it out there. I'm having a very good friend of mine do music, so that's another reason I wanted to justify making this game. Like, I'm going to be bearing my entire soul to the world, essentially. So let's put some music in there, really get the mood set, and I'm going to make all the art for it. So it's a game about depression, and I understand that that's not going to be accessible to many people. So I've been very careful about putting in many warnings, content warnings. It's the first time I've ever done that. So I'm taking my time to research that as well, because I understand if you can't play it, because I wouldn't want you to if you think it's going to be hurtful, and that's completely fine. And it's scary in a way, because, you know, I have always thought of my games as being accessible and relatable. It's just I want to do right by people who will see that as like, maybe I do want to experience this, but I'm going to wait, and I want to be mindful of that because it's tough. But long answer short, I'm making a game about depression, and it's really good. It's just I don't know when it's going to come out yet, so I will let I will let you know once I know.
Absolutely. And thank you also for sharing all of that, and for having that level of consideration and thoughtfulness for, you know, your future players. I think that's a really incredible thing. So
I had my therapist vet it as well. So if she thinks it's okay, then I think it's okay. Like, that was a very like, she encourages the game making a lot, because, you know, some people have like writing, drawing, painting, photography, like all sorts of expression, and mine just happens to be smashing at my keyboard for several hours. And she validated it. Of course, like, just because one mental health professional says like this is good, I don't want to take that as like, all right guys, she said it's good, you guys are all like, you guys are fine too. So again, I just want to make it very clear that it's okay that it's if you feel like you can't play it, because it's my game, and it's mostly just made for me. I just want to put it out there for yucks, I guess, at this point, because I like, starting out in games, you know, you don't think anyone's gonna look at your stuff, so I always went under the assumption that like, this is for me anyway, so I'm just gonna put it on these platforms, because why the hell not? And now that, after like several years thinking like, not trying to give myself a big head, like, oh, I have people who like my work. Of course they're going to check it out. Like I still don't think anyone cares. I just literally do everything for myself. I only make games I want to play.
I feel the same way. Every time I put like writing out or a game out and someone's like, I really resonated with this part. I'm like, oh,
It's like, oh, yes.
anticipated.
Validation.
Yeah, that was just me. That was just something I thought about. So thanks. But I totally get
It
it.
was a really good feeling.
It is for sure. But so eventually, when this beautiful game is published, and before then, where can people find you online and find your work?
Yeah, so people can find my work mostly on itch. My itch page is mkid, emmkid.itch.io. So that's where I'll post any and all of my personal work, and I will usually announce, a date or anything like that on my Twitter, which is just at Emma Kidwell. And I believe I will have a little publisher to push my game. They're called Post Horn, I believe. And they'll be taking care of a bunch of the media side of things. It's the very first time I'm using a publisher, and one of the guys who founded it, I'm gonna butcher his name, but I think it's JV. Apologize, but I couldn't think of another person to trust more. So that's where you'll be able to find it. Really bad at promoting myself, but yeah, Twitter and itch are the places where I'll be.
Perfect. Well, I'm sure everyone else like myself is eagerly waiting to see what's next. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me about your game and all of your game making processes.
And, again, thank you for helping to orchestrate all of this. I'm sure it's a lot of work, and this was a lovely interview, and I had a good time. So thank you. It was really good.
Thank you.